Това е един проект на UFO Disclosure Bulgaria. Това ще бъде една поредица от филми, срещи с много интересни хора. Хора, които ще ви говорят за неща, свързани с феноменалното, с загадъчното, за НЛО, научни факти и доказателства. И сега това видео, което ще видите, първото видео от тази поредица е с Kathleen Marden. Тя е племеница на Бети Хил. Бети Хил е съпругата на Барни Хил. Семейство Бети и Барни Хил, които са били отвлечени, или това е първият известен случай на нас за отвличане от извънземни. Катлин, която ще видите в това видео, тя има много интересни разкази от нейните проучвания, свързани с НЛО, с паранормалното, с явления от други светове. Надявам се, че това видео ще ви бъде интересно. Моля ви за вашите коментари, след като видите видеото. Пожелавам ви приятно гледане. We are very happy to have you in UFO Disclosure Bulgaria. Can you introduce yourself with a few words?
Yes, my name is Kathleen Marden, and I became involved in this field because Betty and Barney Hill were my aunt and uncle, and they were the first individuals in the United States whose investigation case was taken seriously. They had an abduction in 1961, and many of the scientists who investigated their case believed it was real. This is the book that Stanton Friedman and I wrote about their experience, and it is really a case study. It gives you insight into who they were. And Betty was a social worker for the state of New Hampshire. Barney worked for the post office, but they were both actively involved in the civil rights movement. In fact, Barney was appointed to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, State Advisory Committee, and received an award from Sergeant Shriver from the Federal Poverty Program. So they were highly credible people. Mm-hmm. And that's how I became involved for many years now.
So when you heard for first time about UFO and abduction, I believe with Betty and Barney Hill,
yes.
What do you think? What came in your mind at that time?
I was 13 years old.
Oh yeah, oh, okay.
And Betty called my mother, who was her sister, and told her that how concerned she was because she and Barney had a UFO that had followed them the previous night through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and that it had come so low, it was within 100 feet of them, that they were concerned about contamination from the craft.
And also, actually, you interviewed them about this case.
Oh, absolutely. We were close, very close family.
Uh-huh.
And so within 2 days, my family drove the 20 miles to their house, and I saw some of the physical evidence, the shiny spots on the trunk of the car that were magnetized, the watches that no longer worked, although they were working fine.
Did they stop on the time about when that happened, or
they stopped that night? They were working fine at a little after 10 o'clock when they checked their watches and rewound them. When they arrived home 3 hours late at 5 o'clock in the morning, their watches were not working, and they never ran again. There was a lot of evidence in the case. Mm-hmm. So that is how I became involved in this. And for the past 30 years or so, I have been an investigator on the Mutual UFO Network's international and national director of experiencer research. I'm also involved in the Edgar Mitchell Foundation for research into extraterrestrial encounters. And we have both organizations have done comprehensive studies on experiencers. So that is what I really specialize in, is working with experiencers to find commonalities, to identify information. And I also have a 15-member experiencer research team who work with experiencers on a daily basis. And basically what they do is non-judgmental listening, which is so important. They also make referrals. If people are having difficulty, they need to see a therapist, then they can make referrals to a therapist. That sort of thing.
When I was in Peru last year, one gentleman told me that he said, "Do you believe that 1% of the population of this planet was abducted?" And most of them, they don't know that happened. What do you think?
Well, based upon the statistics from a study that Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs and Dr. Don Donderi were involved in, that's quite possible. There are many, many people coming forward now who are in their 50s and in their 60s who had these abductions, who have these memories, who are ready to talk about it now and are looking for other experiencers that they can share their experiences with. So we sort of have an underground movement, really, where people, a lot of people, are talking to one another about what happened. And I think the reason for the underground movement is there has been so much ridicule in the United States. The disinformants did the best that they could to destroy the lives of people who had these experiences. And even though these people did not want to come forward with their story, oftentimes it hit the news media and it was not consensual. That happened with my aunt and uncle. They agreed to work with scientists, with UFO investigators. They told family and friends. But it was one of my Aunt Betty's friends who spoke to a newspaper reporter who ended up publishing for 5 days in a row in a Boston newspaper the experience that they had. It was devastating to my aunt and uncle, who were so prominent in the state of New Hampshire and involved in doing good work with people in that state.
Did that abduction change them life, Betty and Barney?
It absolutely did change their lives, and it changed my life too.
Yeah.
I think it changed
But
the
how?
whole family.
Perspective of the life, or?
First of all, Barney was very traumatized because he had conscious, continuous recall of observing what he described as figures standing on this craft that he was looking at through the window on the craft, through binoculars that he was holding to his eyes. And he described them as being somehow not human. They were dressed in black, shiny uniforms. And he felt very threatened by them. He felt that he was going to be captured. And so
And hurt,
it was
eventually.
very traumatic.
Yeah.
They ended up being referred to a psychiatrist because my uncle developed physiological symptoms that would not recede with traditional medical treatment. So he was referred to Dr. Benjamin Simon, who was a very prominent neuropsychiatrist in the United States. Dr. Simon had worked during World War II with the Army. He was a colonel in the Army. And he had set up the psychiatric unit at the Mason General Hospital on Long Island in New York, and very successfully treated veterans who were returning from the war front, who perhaps they had become blind, but there was no physiological symptom. And Dr. Simon worked with them and discovered that it was very complex. They might have had their best friend killed in front of them, and it received a Dear John letter from their lover the week before that. And it was the combination of these things that led to the blindness. Dr. Simon worked very successfully with these veterans. He also worked very successfully with my aunt and uncle. He used separate hypnosis on them. One of them was in a room where they could not hear the other one. He reinstated their amnesia because they had amnesia for the abduction itself. And then at the end of these sessions, he allowed them to listen to their hypnosis tapes where they both told the same story of being abducted, taken aboard a craft by these non-human entities who performed very strange physical examinations on them, gave them some information, and then released them unharmed and apologized for frightening them. So these were not terrifying beings. It was only that my aunt and uncle knew nothing about this.
And that's why.
They didn't know. They didn't know if they'd be killed or
Right.
carried off to another planet or what.
Yeah. And you have the original records about this.
I have the original hypnosis recordings.
And
yes.
in the same they add to that DVD.
Yes, that
In the
in their
DVD.
own words is the
Yeah,
DVD that I made. Yes.
Yeah, that will be fantastic. We have that DVD,
Yeah.
fortunately, so we can going to enjoy. You're an expert about abductions. Can you
Yes.
tell us, is this kind of hysteria in the last years for all these abductions, or they really happen and people is scared to death with that?
It varies across the population. There are wannabes who are people who really want to have this kind of relationship with benevolent space brothers and sisters. Oftentimes they will try to call them in. I've worked on cases where they called in the wrong kind. They thought they were going to sit down and have a nice conversation with the beings on this craft, and they ended up being abducted and they couldn't stop it. And it became very bad for them. There are others who have had very positive relationships with these people. And I have investigated some of these cases too, and I have felt the presence of these non-humans. I could feel the electrical tingling through my body. As they came, I couldn't see them.
During these interviews with them?
Yes. And so that was proof to me that it actually was happening. I actually had one that I agreed to speak with, who I did speak with telepathically. So that was sort of an experiment. I'm an experimenter.
Yeah.
And I just want to know if it's real. I don't want to just take somebody's word for it. And so I've done that. I found out that it was real in those cases. I've investigated many cases of
Can you say how
abduction.
many numbers if you just...
Well, I can say I've probably talked to more than 1,000.
1,000?
More than
1,000?
over the past 30 years.
Yeah, and all these cases, they're real?
Not all of them. I've exposed hoaxes too.
Oh, okay.
No, they're not all real.
Okay.
But a lot of them are, and there is evidence, and I've been able to use equipment to record very strong electrical fields. I have a tri-field meter.
Okay.
And so I can measure magnetic, electromagnetic, and electrical fields, plus radio microwave, the ambient environment. And then I have the experiencer stand 12 feet away. And then they walk toward it. And at about 10 feet, I get a reading of 1,000 volts per meter.
Wow. 1,000 volts?
Yes. I've had readings that high, and I've used control subjects, and it doesn't happen in the same house on the same day. So I think that is significant.
It is.
I don't know what it means, why that electrical field is there, unless it's an electromagnetic field that comes from being on the craft or near these beings where there is a strong electromagnetic field. It's a mystery to me, and that's why I need scientists. I'm a social scientist. I'm not a physical scientist.
Yeah, I understand.
So I do need physical scientists from the Mutual UFO Network to work
I
with
think
this.
social scientists make much better work than the real scientists.
Yes, well, I'm not just nuts and bolts. I think nuts and bolts is important. But I look at the whole picture. I investigate everything. This is one of the books that I've written. I'm working on my 5th book now. This is the 3rd book that I wrote.
How we can find out this book in the market?
It is available in multiple formats from Amazon.
Yeah.
Amazon.com and Barnes and Noble. And,
okay.
So that would be the best way, I guess. This is some very significant cases of alien abduction that I've investigated. Denise Stoner is my co-author. She is also my assistant on the MUFON's Experiencer research team. And she is a long-time researcher as well as being an experiencer. She had a very significant contact in 1982. She also has a lifelong history of contact. And there's another major case from the state of New Hampshire, and also 4 other cases that I've investigated that I thought were significant enough to put in.
Which of all these cases was more attractive for you, or you was more excited from all these cases you research?
Well, I have to tell you,
Maybe a lot.
The best case I have ever worked on
is the Betty and
is
Barney.
No, I have one. Betty and Barney is sort of boring to me because it was the beginning.
Okay.
But I've worked on a case in Texas. This was a commercial pilot who owned an airport. And it's going to be in my new book that's going to be published in July, The Experiencer's Handbook. This is a pilot who lived at the airport, and one night he heard activity out on the field, and so he went out to investigate what was going on. And there were a group of people out there who were looking at a UFO. And he became so interested. He didn't believe in them. He had no interest in them before then. This was in 2010. He became so interested in it, he used very powerful laser lights to attract them. And they did come back. And they came back, and they came back, and they came closer, and they landed, and he took good photographs of them.
Do you have it?
Yes, I have the photographs.
Can you share with us?
I don't have them on my cell phone. When I do lectures, I show them.
Okay.
And they will be in my book when it's published. Some of them will be in the book.
Okay.
But what happened next is he was abducted. They came into his house and they took him. And he didn't like that at all because it wasn't on his terms and he couldn't stop it. So he started shooting at them. And sometimes he told me that he could hear the ping of the bullets hitting the UFO. Other times the bullets did not hit, they would have hit the UFO, but there was no ping. And that type of UFO would just dive down into the ground and disappear. So they were interdimensional, apparently. So that's what was one of the things that was so interesting to me, because I'm very interested in the interdimensional aspect of all of this. Because there is an interdimensional part, there's a paranormal part, and so I'm beyond the beginners, nuts and bolts, and finding out what's going on, to the more exotic cases, you might say. But it is the best evidence case that I ever have from a very credible witness. I have witnesses who attest to his sanity, and they have also seen this at the airport. So it's a really big case, and you can read more about it in my book that will be
in the future book.
Out in July.
Okay,
yes.
we're looking for that.
And then this is my latest book with my co-author Stanton Friedman, based upon years of archival research that we've done. This is about the history of government involvement in the investigation of UFOs in the United States, their findings, the decision to cover up their findings, and those individuals who were involved in the cover-up, who were disinformants, who attempted to destroy not only every compelling case of UFO landings, of UFO sightings, and of UFO abductions, but they also attempted to destroy the careers of the scientists who were researching this. And some major scientists. One was driven to suicide. It's all in the book, and it's all based upon factual information.
Yeah.
what they did.
What kind of advice you can give to the public if they never had experiences like that? How they supposed to act to what they supposed to do?
Well, that is a good question. Most experiencers don't want to tell other people
Okay.
about what happened to them because they might have told somebody and the person said, well, what have you been smoking, or what have you been drinking, or they laughed at them, or they thought they were crazy.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So it's been very difficult for the people who have really had these experiences. So I say be respectful, realize that there are people who are delusional, there are people who are mentally ill, there are people who are hoaxing, but most of the people who have had these experiences, I'd say about 60%, have had real experiences, and they have been oftentimes traumatic and have oftentimes changed people's lives. Well, yes, and in that, the case I talked about in Texas, not only were the UFOs coming in, but also I think that an interdimensional portal was opened and not closed. That's my theory.
Okay.
And I believe that these spiritual entities entered through that portal, interdimensional portal as well, because people at that airport were observing two ghosts. One, they were both women. Two women had been killed in crashes at that airport. Their clothing was torn. They could see through them. One of them was crying and holding a baby. And so that was rather upsetting for the people who were involved in this. There was also some time slips going on where not only my primary witness, but also his mother, who was actually staying with him because the family thought he was nuts. They thought he'd gone off the deep end and wanted him to get psychiatric help. And he said, just give me a chance to prove this is real. Well, his mother stood at the window of his apartment with him one night and looked out, and what they saw was not the runway lights on the airport. They saw what appeared to be a grassy savanna and mammoths out there grazing. I know it sounds crazy, but they're credible witnesses, and he was a credible witness too. So I think that there's more going on here than just nuts and bolts. UFOs flying here, using nuclear propulsion from another planet. I think that they have developed interdimensional technology, and I think they arrive here very rapidly. And they can be seen, they can become three-dimensional, they can leave physical evidence, they can be photographed, but then they can become interdimensional and not be seen as well.
So they don't have a physical bodies, or?
They can become physical.
Okay.
They come into our dimensional reality.
Yeah. Okay. Are you familiar with the poltergeist?
Poltergeist activity, yes.
Yeah. Do you think is this activity of the visitors, or they happening because of the psychic ability of the humans?
That is a very good question. And in my 2012 commonality study with Denise Stoner, we had a 50-person group. There were 50 experiencers who participated in the study. We had a 25-person control group. We asked them if they had experienced paranormal activity in their homes. And 88% of the experiencers said that they had. And it was much lower among the control group. Free asked that question, and in my MUFON study, we also asked that question. And it's up to between 60 and 70% of experiencers are having that kind of thing, either poltergeist activity or light orbs that appear to be under intelligent control that float around their houses, and they see these. I've seen them.
Yeah.
And
you do you have? I mean, can you confirm or which make that poltergeist to act?
what makes it?
Yeah, what makes
I
it?
don't know. I don't know if it's coming from the human psyche, if
Okay.
it's coming from that electrical field around that human after they have had an abduction experience.
Okay.
That could possibly be what it is. I can offer hypotheses, but I don't have
Yeah.
firm evidence about what is actually causing it.
So, all these people who are going to watch that video, do they need to be scared for something unusual if they became a witness of something unusual, or they need to be relaxed and accept it?
Well, that's a good question too, because as relaxed as people try to be, it does have a profound effect upon your psyche to see this sort of thing that is, even though you might know that it exists, that has been seen by many people, when you have your own personal experience, it can be transformation. Best wishes to everyone who's watching this.
Thank you.